I didn't go to seminary to become a minister as much as I went to seminary to learn how to see God face to face. I know it sounds outrageous, but I wanted to be like Moses. I wanted to see Jesus. I wanted to be like the mystics down through the century. I wanted to remove the veil separating the world as we see it every day and the holiness of God, both within it all, but also over and above it all. And I'm here to tell you that it didn't go the way I expected it would. My first day as a brand new part-time associate minister at the Second Congregational Church of Cohasset, I'd been in seminary 7 weeks. There I was, sitting at my desk. And I was all alone because the church was empty. The senior minister had gone away for a 3-day off-site workshop. And the secretary, whose name was Dee Dee, and she really was the second pastor because she'd been with Gary for 17 years and she knew everyone, and so people called to talk with her. Well, she was away caring for her elderly mother who lived away. And it was one of those Cohasset days. It was gray and it was dark and it was blowing a gale off the water and there were waves of rain washing against the church window. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, I wonder what a minister does. And then the phone rings and I think, there's something a minister can do. I can pick it up. Good afternoon, the Second Congregational Church of Cohasset. This is Max Olmsted speaking. Gary? No, I'm sorry, Gary's not here right now. How can I help you? Well, where's Gary? I'm sorry, Gary's away for a few days. How can I help you? Well, let me talk to Dee Dee then. I'm sorry, Dee Dee's not here either. Perhaps I can help you. Well, where's Gary? Well, Gary's away in New Hampshire for 3 days. 3 days? Yes. And Dee Dee's away too, you say? Yes, I'm sorry, she's away visiting her mother. Well, when will she be back? I'm sorry, I don't know that. Is there a number I can reach Gary at? I'm sorry, Gary did not leave me his number. Well, who are you? I'm Max Olmsted, the brand new associate minister. And Gary's gone for 3 days? Yes, perhaps I could help you. Who are you? I'm Max Olmsted, and today's my first day as a minister here to help out Gary. It's quiet. Well, I guess you'll have to do. My father's dying, and I need you to come over right now. And I said, I'm very sorry to hear that. What did you say your name was? Which is a polite way of saying you never said your name. And I'm sorry about this story, but I don't actually remember the woman's name. And it's very sad for me, but I don't. It was a long time ago. But let's just call her, for the purpose of this story, Carol McKinley. This is Carol McKinley calling, and my father's dying at home right now, and I'd like you to come over. Thanks, Carol. I'll be over in a few minutes. And we hung up. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. I pushed the chair away from the desk, went, whew, and thought, what do ministers do now? And then it occurred to me that not only had I forgot to ask Carol her address, but this was the old days and the phone didn't tell you what her number was. So I remember thinking, think fast, Max. You're a lifelong Congregationalist. What should you do? The directory. She'll be in there. Gorham, Kemp, Larson, McKinnell, Nason. No McKinley. They aren't listed. They're not even members. Gary and Dee Dee have been here so long, they just knew that they would know. But I don't know. Oh, that's right. There's a phone book. Check the phone book. Thank God the Cohasset phone book is small. I flipped through it. Only one McKinley on Jerusalem Road. Where in God's name is Jerusalem Road? Well, there must be a town map in the back here. Up there is Jerusalem Road. Oh my God. It starts way over here and goes all the way out by the shore and along the beach and then loops back around town. I wonder which end of the street their number's at. So I put on my raincoat, grabbed my prayer book, because I still didn't really know what I was going to do. and went out to my car and drove to the nearest end of Jerusalem Road, which was just 1 block down from the church. And so I was driving slowly along the road as those sea winds were gusting and pushing the car. And it was late afternoon, so it was getting dark. And I was trying to make out the numbers on the mailboxes, but a lot of people didn't have numbers on the mailboxes because they didn't want strangers and ministers to find them. Not out in Cohasset. And also, most of them had hedges and fences, so you couldn't see the house where the number was. But finally, I came across 2 consecutive mailboxes with numbers on them, and I discovered that I'd started at the wrong end of the street. So I drove for about 5 minutes, and I came what had to be the right driveway by process of elimination. And I went in, and it was a long, winding driveway that made its way all the way up to this big hunk of granite ledge on which a big old house was sitting. They would have called it a cottage when they built it back in the 1920s, but it sort of looked like Hearst Castle in miniature. And it was overlooking these waves crashing on the rocks. If you've been down the South Shore, you know exactly, or up to Rockport or Gloucester, you know what I'm talking about. And there were several cars parked in front of the house, so I was hopeful I had the right place. So up to the door I went, and the whole windward side of me got soaked by the rain. I remember I was soaked, like on a line, right down the middle. And I rang the bell, and a man opened the door, and I introduced myself, and guess what he said? "Where's Gary?" And so we did the "Where's Gary" routine for about a few more minutes, and he said, "My dad's in the living room. Come with me." And as I followed him into the room and was introduced, the first response was, "Where's Gary? When's he coming back? Who are you?" And in the middle of the room was a man, an old man on a bed. And gradually, the "Where's Gary" questions stopped, and we gathered in a circle. And the holiness just pervaded the room as we circled and watched this old man's breath, in and out. And every movement was vital and closely observed. And I just stood there and listened to them tell stories about their beloved. And I watched as a daughter caressed her father's forehead, and a son held his hand. And every word, every gesture was real and true, full of meaning, stripped of any pretense or ambiguity, because this was going to be the last time. And time slowed down right until it was like it was ticking with that old man's breath. And it felt like we were all holding our breaths. And I thought to myself, I wonder what's going to happen. It was like we were all suspenseful, fearful, not wondering, not knowing what was going to happen, because none of us had ever been there before. We knew it, an idea of what was next, but we didn't know what it sounded like or felt like, or what it was going to change, and how it was going to feel in our hearts, and how vibrant and clearly focused everything would seem thereafter compared to normal. And so gradually, no one was saying anything. We were just standing and watching. And so I breathed in, and on the out-breath I said, "Shall we pray?" And no one asked where Gary was, so I started. And I prayed a prayer of parting, and then I said the 23rd Psalm, and I said the Lord's Prayer, and I went to the man's head and placed my hand on it. "May the Lord bless you and keep you." And they were crying, and they were all looking quietly at the man. When one of them finally looked up and met my eye, I said softly, "I'll let myself out. Give me a call, and God be with you." And as I walked out of the car, which now was the other side of me, was windward, I got soaked on the other side, and I drove back to the church, it was like everything was in slow motion. So I went inside, and there was no one there, so no one cared. So I went upstairs to the church and sat there in the dark by myself, and I was filled with a certainty of the presence and the power of God. And on my way home that night, and sitting in my little cottage by the beach down Hummerock with my dog and my cats, I could feel eternity. Day one of being a pastor. Now, in the 20 years since, I've been with dozens of people and their loved ones and the Lord our God as that veil separating this life from eternal life is removed. And we get to see life in a way that changes forever how we see life again. And last Tuesday, I was with my mother. All of us got to be there on Monday night as we said our goodbyes. I remember my mother's last words, "Goodbye, dear," as we went home. My sisters, who lived further away, stayed until like 2 in the morning, saying their goodbyes. But I went home, I was so tired, so tired. But the next morning when I woke up, my first thought was, no one called. The hospital didn't call, my sisters didn't call, so I called the hospital. It's funny to call the hospital and say, "Is my mother alive?" "No, your mother's chugging right along." So I got the kids off to school, I got dressed, and I drove back down to Boston. And I entered her room at 9 on the button. She wasn't what I would call chugging. She was breathing, just like that old man, 20 years before. So I walked into the room, I said, because her eyes were closed, and these are all pastoral tips to you when you were in my shoes. They hear you. "Hi, Mom." And I gave her a kiss. I paused for a second. I said, "I think it's time for you to go be with your parents and your brothers and Uncle Harry and your best friend Patty and Kirsten, who you haven't seen in a long time." She breathed in and she breathed out. And I said, "Tell them we love them and that we miss them." And just like that, her breath slowed. So I waited to see what would happen next. And so I held her hand. I said, "I thought last night was great, Mom. The way we were all here and everyone was able to tell you how much we loved you." And her breath slowed a little bit more. And you have to understand, breath in, breath out. Like, what's going to happen? So I waited again. And then I told her, "Mari, Laura, and Leo, and Lucas love you so much. And they're so sad that they're not going to see you again soon." And her breath slowed even more, almost to a stop. So I waited. And on her next in-breath, I put my hand on her forehead and I said, "I want you to know, Mom, that the boys cried themselves to sleep in our bed last night about you leaving. But I hugged them and I told them that you are so proud of them and that you will be watching over them." And she breathed 3 more times. And then there were no more inhales. She'd gone at 9:20. 9 o'clock to 9:20. And as I turned to go to tell the doctor was coming through the curtain. And I said, "I think my mother has just died." And they said, yes, we were watching on the monitor out there. So I sat down as they examined her, and I waited for about 20 minutes for my sister to come over. And there was this enormous sense of eternity that filled me. It was so easy and so beautiful and nothing to fear and absolutely heartbreaking because everything's different than I want it to be. And yet so overwhelming in the certainty that the love is now forever. Seeing life with the veil removed. So I plugged it into my computer when I got home. Day 6,690 of being a pastor. Thanks be to God.